Welcome, everyone, to the first installment of our Engagement Experts 101. This is a new educational series or branch of our Engagement Experts webinar series, where we'll provide practitioners with a forum to discuss best practices on a variety of employee listening related topics. The focus of our first installment is pulse surveys, something that I am really passionate about and a big believer in. In our sister podcast, The Modern People Leader, we cover a variety of different tactics and approaches for gathering employee feedback. And over the last 18 months, one of the most reliable sources of employee feedback has been pulse surveys. So we've had a lot of conversations about how companies are using these, whether it's been getting a pulse on return to work or future of work, vaccinations, diversity and inclusion, or even engagement itself. Pulse surveys have been an effective way to gather quick to action feedback. However, when we start collaborating with clients, we often hear how executives and employees are frustrated with the results of their pulse surveys, and even HR teams feel as they could be getting more out of the data. So I'm very excited to have an amazing guest speaker today who will share her experience with using pulse surveys as a strategic tool. But before we jump into the conversation, I just want to remind you of a few housekeeping items. We'll kick off the session as usual with a quick poll that will allow you to provide some real-time feedback into the conversation. From there, we're going to have a short 20 to 30-minute conversation with our guests, and then we'll tee up our Ask Me Anything section, which will allow you to ask questions directly to today's speaker. And as always, we want this to be a forum of discussion really for you. So please drop any questions you have into the Zoom at any point in time. So with that said, let's get started. My colleague Oksana will be launching a quick poll here shortly. So please share your feedback and we'll come back to that here in a few minutes. So I am really excited for our guest today. Rhiana Barr is an absolute beast. She's the Chief People Officer of Greenlane Holdings. And we actually had her on the Modern People Leader as an individual guest. And we loved the conversation so much that we brought her back as part of a group discussion, which is now one of our most widely viewed episodes. So I couldn't help myself and had to invite her to our Engagement Experts live chat. So thrilled to have you today. Welcome, Rhiana. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm thrilled to be here, Stephen, and that's exciting to hear that our podcast is trending. This is awesome. Fantastic news for Modern People Leaders. A great panel that you put together. So happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, apparently people love group chats, so we will probably ask you to join us again. But for today, before we get into the details of our conversation around pulse surveys, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story? How did you get to where you are today?
I have 2 decades of progressive HR experience spanning a number of various industries and sectors. I've had some fantastic mentors along the way that have taught me really say yes, take that opportunity, take the challenge. So that would be my feedback. And I joined Cushco Holdings 2 years ago. That was definitely a shift in career. Had the opportunity and privilege to be the Chief People Officer for that organization. Really, the focus in that organization was a transformational journey to get to where we are today. So we are so excited. We've announced a mega merger with Greenlane Holdings. So now Cushco is part of the Greenlane family. So Stephen, thank you for representing Cushco with that hat today. I'll make sure to get you some new Greenlane swag. But recent merger, we're really excited. That's what we have going on.
Awesome. Yeah, and I remember it's been just so interesting having had multiple conversations with you because you guys were very early in the merger, and now you guys have pretty much worked through that whole process. So tell us a little bit about Greenlane Holdings, your business, etc.
So Greenlane is a global NASDAQ listed company. We're a leading ancillary and house of brands company. We own 8 premium CPG brands in the ancillary sector, and we're building a pipeline of growth through organic and inorganic growth. We really want to make sure that we're driving optimum shareholder value. really staying focused on all things that we've talked about in the past, and that's really ensuring that we have a people first culture.
Love it, love it. So getting to the topic, I know that you're a big Pulse survey fan. In fact, that's why it came up in our Modern People Leader conversation. So that's why we have you here today. You've used them quite a bit over the last year and a half. Do you have a favorite of all, all the Pulse surveys you've done? Like, does any one of them stick out to you as being particularly awesome?
Oh, that's a good question. If I had to choose one, I'm going to go with the Pulse survey we launched early on in the pandemic. And really, it was predicated around employees' well-being. So, as an individual going home, managing little people, all of those stresses, we really, as the leadership team, wanted to check in with our team. And yes, because we've leveraged Pulse surveys, that was our go-to. So the purpose or the why behind this Pulse survey was really about well-being. Where can we as an organization support you and meet you where you are and make sure that we're tooling you with all the proper resources. And so what we found out of this Pulse survey were two core themes. One was predicated around mental health and the other around physical health. So I love a good gym workout, but gyms were closed. What do we do? How do we take that? And then, wow, the mental challenges we were all struggling with. So we were able to very quickly to partner with our internal cultural champions. We went to market, did some RFPs. We selected two app-based platforms. And one was predicated again around mental health and really making sure that we were modeling that behavior. And so all of us from an executive perspective in our town halls and our monthly team meetings, we're really talking about how we were using the app. Wow, I really found a lot of value in this particular meditation series. What do you guys think? So really helping to be relatable to the employees, that we had also, I think, modeling that behavior and maybe the stigma that existed then, around mental health and bringing those conversations into the workforce. And we found this resonated really well from our employee base and within, our employee resource groups. Second platform, really around, that the physical health, if you will. We launched a step challenge through an app, and it was a total blast. We're a highly competitive organization and group of individuals, and so we created this journey together, setting milestones, goals, rewards, and recognition in this app, and really had the opportunity to chat with each other, encourage everyone to get out and move, whether you were stepping, lifting, whatever physical activity you like to engage in, you were able to participate. And so these programs were so successful with a quick repulse that we did on them, that we've had it in the organization for over a year now, and we're bringing them into the Greenlane family. So we're currently doing a journey around Greenlane. Let's get to know everyone. And we have, massive participation. We're talking 75, 80% of the organization. So I think it's a good way to, have that community feel and perspective. So that would be my favorite Pulse survey. Long way of answering your question, but we've seen, real actionable insights that have resonated well with our workforce.
Yeah, what I love about that example is you guys had a clear topic, which we'll talk about the hallmarks of a successful survey here in a little while. But you also were able to get to very kind of specific outcomes and action, and I think that's just such a great story. And I already have so many questions that I want to ask and I want to dig into, but we'll get to that here shortly. Before we jump into our conversation, let's take a quick look at the quick poll results from earlier. Oksana, if you can share those with the group. So it looks like the number one area of interest in terms of pulsing is culture and values, which is not surprising at all for me. And as far as the challenges, survey design, so kind of the upfront process, and driving action, which is on the back end. Both of which, any surprises for you, Rhiana?
No surprises at all. This is actually, refreshing as we get into the topic today. Hopefully I'll be able to add some insights to all of you, because I think I've been through that journey, and, every survey is different. So happy to dig in where necessary and where needed.
And again, just the last reminder for those challenges, feel free to hit us on the Q&A chat when you have anything that you want to dig into into. So with that said, I'm really looking forward to getting your thoughts on the topic. Are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's go. Okay. So my first question, why do you think pulse surveys have emerged as such a popular form of gathering employee feedback? At Workify, it's been, we offer a wide variety of employee feedback channels. Pulse surveys by far have been the most active channel of activity that we've had with our clients. And so I'm curious, in your seat as Chief People Officer, why do you think that's the case?
Couple things, right? So they're quick, flexible, you get real-time feedback, that in my experience really drives clear, actionable insights and actions for the organization. You have the ability to really drill deep on a specific topic versus, an annual engagement survey. I love them. I am a fan. Don't misunderstand. But it's a year, right? And it's a lot of questions. So this is, I have a topic. I want to understand what's going on. You get super high participation and you can turn results really, really quickly. And this allows you to stay connected to your organization, your employees as kind of industry changes, different experiences that are happening in industry kind of function business-wise. It's a quick way to hop in and see what's going on and make sure that you're all rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, it's amazing to me, and I'm the same way. We obviously one of the tools and channels that we offer are engagement surveys, which maybe if we have time we can even dig into that a little bit, like the difference between engagement survey and pulse survey. But what we have seen is that the engagement survey serves its purpose,
Mhm.
right? You're looking at the broad topic of employee engagement, and there's a lot of things that you should measure and look holistically. The
Yeah.
pulse survey, it's very targeted and it's topical. You should really be focusing on something that is really trending with your people.
Mhm.
But it really is surprising to me. I don't know why I continue to be surprised how many people are still only focusing on an
Yeah.
annual engagement survey. And so I think the pulse component, I think there is a need that companies need to have a more regular kind of pulse in there on their employee feedback and employee sentiment. And once you've done that successfully, like once you've really nailed it, in my experience, there's no going back
Yeah.
because if you share that data with your executives and you share that data with your employees, and you do have a clear area of measure and you're able to drive action, it's just such a great feeling. And so then the question is like, let's do this again on this other really, really, really important topic. And so the issue for that we see is that it can be it's a struggle. It's not,
Yeah.
it's easy to get it out and do it right, but it's also easy to get it wrong. And so what are some of the common pitfalls that you've encountered?
That's a good question. I would say spending the time up front to ask yourself why. Why do I want to pulse? What is the purpose? I think to your earlier point, once you get into a rhythm, it's like, great, we'll go pulse that. Let's figure out, let's see what's happening in the business. But if you don't actually have the solid foundation of why are we pulsing, what is it that we want to gain out of this, you're going to miss the mark, or you have the opportunity to miss the mark. And I've learned this the hard way. So, what is the specific area that you want to focus in on? Make sure that you curate those questions so that you can get very clear, actionable insights out of that pulse survey. And I would say, be mindful about how many times you are pulsing the organization. I know we've talked about this prior too. I love pulses, but let's make sure that we're very, very thoughtful when we're asking for our employees to engage so you have max participation.
Yeah, and I think the topic of survey fatigue is an
Mhm.
interesting one. I you've commented that if you focus on the same topic over and over, that's when you've seen your employees
Yeah.
disengage. And so are there one of the challenges that you can have is how do you leverage the pulse survey in a way that you can gather some trendable data.
Mhm.
Is that something that you also consider when you're choosing new topics? Are you looking at individual metrics over the long run, or is it truly like we want to get data on well-being? We're not so much focus on a particular metric?
I don't know that there's a right or a wrong way to do that. I think what I have found over the years is really stay focused on that topic. You know, keep the pulse narrow and go action against it. I think that it's you're going to yield, I think, more engagement, better results by staying super focused. You know, I love doing a look back, right? So as we think through, you know, what are the pulses that we've done over the year? You can look back and say, okay, wow, look at all of the really great, remarkable things we've been able to glean insights and how we've been able to action to engage the workforce. And you can do, you know, a nice recap out to the organization and really thank your employees for engaging and, you know, take that walk through what it's been and what that journey's look like. I think early on when I started using pulses, it's like I'd go back and ask the same questions and how are we doing? And let's make sure we have that internal metric. And did we improve there? And you couldn't go down a rabbit hole. And our employees, listen, I think this is the great thing, Stephen. They told me, hey, Rhiana, this is fantastic. We understand what you and your team, you know, are doing. It's the same stuff, right? Like, not really going to answer. We did see a small dip in participation, you know, so having that feedback, I think two-way is really important as well. And so, you know, our approach, you know, more specifically over this year has been, you know, a specific topic, being very, very mindful on the why and really driving home that purpose.
Love it. And so one of the promises I made to those that we invited to the session is that we would give a behind the scenes view into how you actually run pulse surveys. So tell us about your approach from like design to deployment. You know, what does the typical process look like now that you kind of gotten into your rhythm?
Okay, so I'll try to provide, you know, deep dive here for everyone since you've promised this. So how do you determine the topic? Great question. I think this is the beauty of a pulse survey. Anything goes. Whatever you want to know something more about, design your survey that way. I would say, you know, spend the time to say, you know, we really wanting to understand kind of well-being, maybe a new program or initiative or a product launch, or I want a quick pulse on employee net promoter score. Whatever it is, define that focus. And then you can get into the questions, right? So again, why are we pulsing? You know, what is it that we're hoping to yield from these results? And then you can actually design the questions. When you think about the number of questions, it's a pulse survey. So again, kind of coming out of that mindset of annual engagement, 50 questions deep, this is quick. So I'm going to give a range. I don't know, Stephen, if there's a right answer or wrong answer, but I would say, you know, we tend to find highest results in engagement when we kind of stick between 5 and 10 questions max. For something maybe more robust, we might, you know, pop that to 15, but I've never done anything more than that. And again, I think that, you know, finding the questions that really will yield those results for you. So back in the day, I did use a free service tool. Shout out SurveyMonkey, love you. But you really had to curate the questions yourself. And so what I found in that process is that, you know, all very best intention, you know, from myself and my team, but we were drafting these questions. And so sometimes when you get those results back and you try to really analyze, couldn't quite figure out, you know, what action could we take. So I would say there's so many amazing platforms like Workify and others that have those questions curated for you. So if you're trying to drive deep, you're going to have someone who has tried and true questions to help you really kind of dig through. So I think that's a little bit of a pitfall to watch out for, you know, kind of all of those designing these surveys is make sure you get those questions right. Let's see. So when it comes to how long do you pulse? So again, this is intended to be quick feedback. And so I would say no more than 5 days. So, you know, let the organization know it's coming. This is super quick. I tend to do a quick midweek ping. Hey, you know, thanks so much for everybody that's participated. We're halfway there. Again, our goal is 100% participation. We want every voice heard. Again, it's 5 questions. You can do it from your phone. It's super quick. Help us make sure that your voice is represented. And then when we receive that data, we do a very quick process to sit down and kind of analyze the data. So again, it's just 5 questions. So you're able to say, wow, this really jumps out. We need to action this. We then engage our employee champions across the globe to sit down with us and analyze the results and come up with some actionable insights that we can take as an organization. We then present that into, you know, executive team meeting, make sure that we're all holding hands, and that we have sponsorship and buy-in. So our executive team is very engaged in these pulse surveys, and they're really championing this alongside HR and the culture champions across the globe. We then take that data to a town hall, and then we show everything. So we even get into the dashboard. So it is full transparency. This is what we've seen. These are the steps that we're taking. And then depending on the topic, Stephen, we may say, we're going to come back and pulse these same questions in the next 60 days to make sure that we're hitting the mark. If we're missing the mark, obviously we can do a quick pivot and adjust. But if not, we might say, these are the steps we're taking. Thank you so much. And then we'll move on to the next item, that we want to pulse as necessary in the organization. I think to summarize, I would say, kind of speed to execution is absolutely key. So we're asking for that quick feedback. As an organization, you need to be prepared, to provide those next steps to your employees quickly as well. And again, I mentioned we're always striving for 100% participation, but one thing that I do want to point out that I think is really key, unlike my annual engagement participation, we see consistently significantly higher participation. So I'm talking 90, 95%. I have a number of surveys over the last year that's been 100%. You can't beat that. I mean, that's the entire organization's voice being represented. This is huge. So pulse surveys, 5 questions, be very thoughtful in why you're doing it, the purpose, go grab the right questions, work with an awesome partner who will help you look really great, and action those results quickly.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And I love that you're at 5 questions. It's interesting when we receive requests to do a pulse survey, and it's a 20 question survey or 25 questions. And it's always hard to push back, right? But the reality is, like, if you do have to be thoughtful, and your employees are considering like what you're saying. And if you're positioning this as a, we really care what you have to say about a specific topic, i.e., and we're going to do a pulse. Most of your employees have been through these types of things before, either, if not at your company, at other organizations. And it's like 20 questions is not a pulse survey. We got to get this down to 5, max 10 is kind of what we look at. And in certain cases, that it could be higher than that. But I think, we would agree with that kind of 5 to 10 range as the sweet spot. And, just to touch on a few things that just to add to what you shared, you spent a lot of time talking about survey design. And, we agree, we think that, and I love that, asking why are we doing the survey? What are the objectives? Once you've identified that, we call those factors. And so, a perfect example is, we had a lot of clients over the last year do a survey on diversity and inclusion, but they also wanted to get an understanding of what engagement looked like, so that they could compare the diversity and inclusion results with, an understanding of a more kind of real time or in the moment understanding of what engagement looked like. And, so those are, the why is we want to get, pulse on diversity and inclusion, and we want to consider engagement as part of that. So there were 2 factors that we measured, for this client, diversity and inclusion, which was actually kind of 2 factors in itself. There were a set of diversity questions, a set of inclusion questions, and then a small set of engagement questions. And so having those factors, that, are answering your why, and then having questions that directly relate to those factors, is the best practice that we see, versus many times, before working with clients, their, HR departments are just Googling, a topic and grabbing questions that, as they see fit. And that leads to, the frustrating end result of like, well, what do we executives, when it gets to the executive report out, like, what do we do with this data? It seems to be all over the place. And so by using this kind of asking yourself why, seeing what factors you're really trying to measure, rolling your questions up to those, it will drive better results. And then just 2 other things quickly: data modeling. So getting your employee data right up front can be the difference in okay results and really driving action in the business. Because to your point, with a 5-question survey, if you've got your data structured correctly, when you get to your analytics phase, you should be able to slice and dice it by location, by department, by legacy company if you are a business that has a lot of acquisitions. So getting the data right up front is clear. And if you're using a SaaS platform or something more than SurveyMonkey, the benefit of doing that is you don't have to ask your employees to identify what department they're in and what location. You should be able to track that behind the scenes. And then the last part is just communications, like clear communications. I love that mid-survey check-in, and then everything that you do. And we have a question from Kelvin around the post-survey close communication process, which we'll want to come back to here in a second. And so, love what you do.
I have a question for you. So listening to that,
Sure.
right, and putting myself in shoes a few years ago, you talked about 3 factors in a pulse. To me, it's like, oh my gosh, that seems like a lot. How many questions did you ask with that particular company to hit those 3 factors?
Yeah, that's great. So that was a 10-question survey.
Okay.
And there were 3 or 4 diversity, 3 or 4 inclusion. Let's call that 8. On diversity and inclusion. And for engagement, it was like two key questions that they look at in their engagement survey, like the big survey. And they're like, okay, these are the 2 questions that matter most. I think one of them was ENPS, and there was like another question. And so, within our platform, you can tie questions to the specific indicator or factor that you're trying to measure. And so we just took, 3 questions, mapped those to diversity. Let's say 4 or 5 questions that were mapped to inclusion, and then 2 questions that were mapped to engagement. So you can still do this with short surveys, and if you have the right tool set, you should be able to get this all set up to drive the reporting. And the factor and question analysis, sometimes it's easier to just look at the factor level as well. Right. So in this example, what the client found was everyone in the company was the scores were all really, really positive related to diversity, but inclusion, the scores were much lower. And if we had mapped all the questions to diversity and inclusion, it would have been hard to really differentiate. Okay, what do we focus on? Do we need to focus on diversity, inclusion? Like, that's a very broad topic. Like, what are we going to do? And it's like, no, because we knew the why and we knew what factors we were trying to analyze, it was clear inclusion was where the company needed to take action on.
So. Yeah, and I think that's a great call out, right? I think sometimes it's like, oh, we can lump this together. Again, with a pulse, go deep on the topic, go ask those 3 questions on each factor. So I do think what I have experienced, right, is you get very clear insights, exactly to your point, Stephen. So that would be, I think, a great piece of advice is don't be tempted to lump something together to hit 5. Ask that 6th question. That's totally okay, because keep the factors separate, because it'll help with internal benchmarking. If you want to do external benchmarking, whatever's important to you. So keep those factors separate. Don't lump. That's a great call out.
So nice. I like, for the audience, Rhiana flipped our script on me by asking questions. So I love it.
Yeah,
and we only have a couple more before we open it up for Q&A. Let's, so you walked us through your typical process. Can you give us an idea of like a real world example? Sometimes it's helpful to just hear, specifically on a topic like what you did. So is there any recent survey that comes to mind that you could walk us through that you did this for?
There is a recent survey. So Greenlane Holdings, Greenlane, we're one big happy family now. So it was really important to us as we're bringing two organizations together to do a post-close or a merger pulse survey. And when you think about it, it's the number of factors like we've been talking about. Wow, how are we going to pulse this when it's a new practice for some of our employees in the organization? So again, thinking through change model, the purposes, how are you feeling about this merger? We were able to sit down with, I'm going to say, both legacy company culture champions across the globe, and really ask for their assistance in creating this survey. So it's one thing I want to make sure that I convey is yes, there are facts and data and you can slice and dice all day long. The beauty is still within the conversation. So, sit down and have those conversations as you're building the survey and then after the survey. So with that, I will talk about, how we built this survey. And so for us, it was important to do some education. Why are we doing this survey, and start to kind of drip campaign that change message. We ensured the organization that it was going to be anonymous, third-party company. The metadata, as we were talking about on the back end, how are we going to set up, the analytical component? We opted very specifically only to set this up between the legacy companies. Because again, we're coming together as one. We didn't want to drill super deep or create anything that didn't feel like team together. And so we shared that. Also, the goal of really, having 100% voices heard within the organization. And so really, theory is let's be better together. I mean, we've come together as two wonderful organizations. Let's make sure that we all feel great on where this is going. So we wanted to focus on 4 factors. So really, our future as a company together, the new leadership team, strategic priorities for our new co, and employee net promoter score. We were able to accomplish all 4 of these factors with 10 questions. So very thoughtfully curated questions underneath each one of those factors. And then again, as I mentioned, we kept the metadata high, so just focusing on both legacy organizations. We then launched the survey into the organization, and we closed it down after 5 days. We did 1 midweek check-in. And not bad. It's not what we wanted, but 80% participation on our first, company together survey. And then I'm going to walk you through the timeline a little more specifically, because I want to make sure that, we convey how quickly this can go when you have the right process structure in place. So we had the survey open for 5 days. 48 hours after we closed it, we met with the culture champions to review the data, analyze, and actually come up with some very specific action items we could do for each one of those 4 factors. 24 hours after that, we met with the executive team and presented out our plans. 24 hours after that, we actually took it to an employee town hall. Again, from a transparency perspective, we included real data shots out of the system to say, this is anonymous, but we want to have transparency in this process. So if you were doing the math with me, within 2 weeks, we had a fully engaged action plan that we've deployed to the organization. And from that, we've been able to, host a number of internal initiatives to really drive or increase engagement in one of those, one or all of the 4 factors that we had an opportunity area. And for this survey specifically, we are going to pulse it again at the end of the year. So we've let our employees know that, because we're doing very specific internal events to make sure that we are closing those gaps. And so we're going to come back and say, did we close those gaps? Did we meet the mark? What adjustments do we need to continue to make going into calendar 22? So that's a real life example of a survey that we actively are engaged in. So hopefully that helps, but I think we received really positive response from the employees on the level of transparency, how specific the questions were, and then how quickly we were able to action.
Love it. So audience, please ask questions. That was a great overview of the process that you follow. There are, in particular, I just reflecting, it's interesting how you had a culture of pulse surveying. You're seeing, really, really high results. You're now, a new entity that's merged. The participation rates dropped a little bit. For us, we're big believers that it's almost like a trust exchange with employees.
Absolutely.
Like I will give you my feedback if I see that and I will participate and engage in these surveys if I see that you guys are like going to live up to your side. And I'm guessing that's probably why you guys have been able, well, at least on the Cushco side, you were able to get such high participation rates. And it's not surprising to me that now merged, with a broader organization, that you're going to have to, go through a couple of cycles to get to, the level of participation that you've seen with other, where you've been. And so that all is interesting. And, as far as questions, when we get to Q&A, guys, please do share with us your questions there. And so, one of the things that I wanted to dig into a little bit as it relates to, the process you follow is, what sort of mistakes, what are some of the issues that you've had to work through in addition, apart from what we've already talked about?
It's a learning journey. Okay. So to all of my HR friends out there, be easy on yourself, right? You have to find the rhythm that works in your organization. So there are a couple things that do jump to mind. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, ditch that free tool much, much earlier in pulse surveys. I can't stress that enough. And again, it's no disrespect to the free tools, but to work with a trusted partner that can really guide you through the process and help you with the data and analytics is huge. I mean, I think this is what a major unlock for us is when we made that jump to very affordable, for all my finance friends out there, very affordable, platform with someone, who actually does this for a living. We touched on this a bit before. Setting up that metadata or the demographic information up front is absolutely crucial when you go to do the data slices on the back end. So spend the time, again, be very thoughtful and, who do you want to ensure is included and what are those kind of, demographic factors in the beginning? So do you want to go global, function, hourly exempt, by leader? Think it through. And make sure that you set that up initially so you can drill down on the back end. Be very thoughtful in your questions, right? So it's a pulse survey. It's supposed to be very focused, go deep, to be very, very thoughtful in those questions. I think, kind of a mistake or a pitfall would be too general or creating them yourself.
Yeah.
And so I would say probably last but not least, it is a bit of a trust exercise. So make sure that you are prepared as, the team responsible to share the data and be very transparent with that data. Show the tool on the platform. I mean, like people are like, this is great. You're actually like real time showing us your sandbox and what you're doing. I am. I think that helps to really build a lot of trust. And then get those results out quickly. And then, what steps are you going to take? So again, if we're asking for that time and commitment for our employees, then, make sure that you're prepared and set up and ready to go on the back end to deliver those results.
Love it. And so on the results side, are you sharing results? Are you extending access to reporting and analytics to other people in the organization, like your leaders, or do managers get access to like their cut of the data? What does that look like?
We have historically, yes. I mean, again,
Okay.
it's one of those things of, we are asking, we are happy to share. That builds, rapport, trust, transparency, a stronger relationship in the organization. So I think we will get back to that cadence in Greenlane.
Yeah, I think that is well, the other thing is it's not HR, like this is an HR
It's not an
driven
HR thing.
process, but it's not, this isn't something that HR owns, right? The ownership is really in the business, and by democratizing the data and sharing your data, again, with a modern platform like Workify, you're going to be able to push access to the analytics directly to certain stakeholders in the business. And it's up to you whether you want to just keep that to executives or, go all the way down to line managers. So last question, and then we will open it up for questions. We have some good ones lined up, so I'm looking forward to getting to those. If I'm a CFO or CEO and our company is hesitant to leverage pulse surveys, maybe we've done engagement surveys in the past once a year, and I'm running into, I'm skeptical, right? My HR department is pitching a new tool or a new approach. What do you think the business case is for why we should commit to more feedback? Like, I'm the CFO, you're pitching to me, like, why should we agree to changing how we do things?
That's great. It's going so well. Maybe having a tough question. I
had to throw one tough one at you.
So I would say, if I were pitching the change in kind of the programmatic element from annualized engagement surveys to pulse, and I'm pitching this to my CFO, I'm going to hit ROI all day long. So know your audience. My CFO versus my CEO, I would probably tell that story a little bit different. So always know your audience, but really kind of focus on the ROI perspective on employee engagement. We know that highly engaged employees perform better, they stay longer, and we want to make sure that our employees feel committed to the organization. They identify with the purpose, our community. They feel satisfied, engaged to bring their best self to work. And I would say the other thing we've actually found a lot of value in our industry. We shift and pivot very quickly based on kind of, legislation, industry regulations. And so making sure that we're staying on top of how our employees are feeling about how we're having to make those pivots in the business so quickly. It's one thing maybe to be in an organization to where you can build an annual operating plan and you just go run that play. That's not our experience in the industry in which we work in. So I think, the dynamic change that happens to make sure that you're bringing your employees along with you is hugely valuable. I think that's how I would pitch it. I think that's what I don't know. We're going to open for Q&A. I'll take any.
No, that I feel like we should do like a pitch, justifying your budget pitch webinar, just like that, because it's so
well, I think we should. And here's the other thing, right? It's really not that expensive. I think sometimes we kind of think like, we're investing all this money, perhaps, right, in an annual engagement survey. To add on, if you have a vendor that you love, right, a pulse, it's so affordable. I'm not saying that wearing my HR hat. I actually love finance, and I'm like, I'm a minor in accounting. It's all about the budget. But really, we've seen the ROI. So it's not like we're talking another platform on top of what you're already paying. Added on, it's very affordable.
Yeah, and it's just the when you talk about like the impact, it can have such a huge impact if you're doing it right. Like, think about going back to your original example of your well-being, your favorite survey being the well-being one that you mentioned at the beginning. Like, those programs that you have been able to deploy, like if, just think about the impact that you're having on your people and productivity and all the things that you can't really calculate ROI on. And so anyhow, I found that last answer extremely helpful. Well, let's open up. We're at that point in the conversation. I told you it goes by quick. And so we got 20 minutes left. And we have some questions here. So let's start up top. We had anonymous attendee. The new hybrid work environment is changing the traditional manner in which managers and their teams interact and possibly even perceive their roles. Mm-hmm. Have you directed surveys to measure this issue? And if so, what have you learned?
So we have done a couple work from home, I'm going to say readiness pulse surveys. So, we had an environment in which we all came to the office to do our job. So whether that's headquarters or operations location. So the shift to go home was something that we as an organization maybe weren't set up for success. And so we did a quick pulse to see what we needed. And then from there, what we were able to do is figure out where we had gaps. And so we actually launched a whole series on, again, so using that data and really kind of drilling deep, we launched then a series on managing remote workforce. And so we've introduced new tools, we've curated new content for managers and employees to make sure that we're driving that connectivity. So we have and we haven't. I think that we've taken the approach of we've gone home, we've tooled up. Again, it comes back to ensuring that managers are really connecting in with their employees, and where we have the opportunity from fostering events, ERG, or our community ERGs, that we're really bringing everyone to in every event that we're doing. So we've seen some value. I wouldn't say that it's been a major focal point outside of a handful of pulses that we've done quickly over the past probably 18 months.
Yeah, so we have done a good amount of work. I can add on to this. Anonymous attendee, since I don't know who you are, if you do want to drill down deeper into this, I would encourage you to just email me, and I would be happy to share additional details around what I'm about to say. And I'm going to say it pretty quick, just so we can get to the other questions. In our culture model, we have 6 indicators that we look at. I'm not going to read them all off, but I'm happy to share them. One of which is management, and what we have seen our clients do is do a pulse on management engagement type questions, or manager effectiveness questions, mm-hmm. and essentially use that as a starting point to design a pulse survey. on like, feedback directly, related to a factor of management. And what that has allowed us and because, in some of the cases, we already had data on those related questions because that was part of, the prior engagement survey that, the company had done. And if not, what that allowed us to do is to understand what aspects of, the factor of management are scoring low, right? Are showing weakness, and by then applying the various analytics. So looking at cuts by manager is one of the cuts that we can look at if the data model will allow that. It's manager and executive are standard, are two of the data points that we typically recommend that we store for our clients. And so by doing that, you can start to see which managers are, have areas for development. And you can then from there consider doing a 360 surveys for managers to get more specific and create action plans for individuals. Or sometimes, we've seen, that initial pulse will give you enough data. And, what we have learned is that there are challenges, and, typically the, communication is one aspect, having given, one-on-one recent one-on-one feedback is another area. And so somewhere during the pandemic, through all of this change, there's been a disruption in like how we exchange feedback and how we have our one-on-ones. And so those are two areas that we've seen companies focus on taking action. And again, I'm happy to share more information, but starting with a group of questions that relate to, a factor of management, I think would be a good starting point for seeing how the new hybrid work model is affecting the manager report relationship.
Stephen, I think that's a good point, because that is one of the things that we saw early on was really the disruption, more specifically on one-on-one. So we actually curated KPIs. Because that's how much we value, the beauty of a one-on-one. And so to kind of drive that home on the performance side, adding that in as a KPI. So wanting to make sure, that we have that constant communication, we're connecting, we're asking those right questions. It did drop off, we saw in the survey. And so we actually did, part of our managing remote toolkit was, reinforcement on one-on-ones, documented one-on-ones.
Documented one-on-ones. Well, I got to get to the next question, or I would ask some more about that. So next question, I mentioned this already. Kelvin asked, specific to Rhiana, you mentioned employee champions in the survey execution process. Can you elaborate on what these are? Great question.
That's a great question. So we have a number of employee resource groups, and we have those led by employees of the organization. And so these are employees that are nominated by the balance of the organization to come in and lead various verticals. So whether this is our health and wellness employee resource group, our community health and employee resource group, fostering events, social justice, there's a number of things. And so these are employees who are nominated, and we ask them to, be the voice, if you will, to represent a number of actions that we're doing. They tend to be great influencers in your organization. They have a great pulse on what's happening, and definitely trusted members of the employees. Does that help answer the question?
I think so. And there's I think further question here in a little while, and that we can get to if we have time. I'm going to keep rolling though. The next anonymous attendee asked, I work at a university, and we do an employee engagement survey every 2 years. We want to start doing pulse surveys, but this is new to our culture. What's the best way to introduce pulse surveys and bring people along to how helpful they can be? So I think we may have already touched this a little bit in the pitch, but what are your thoughts on this question?
I mean, change it's a change, right? So we know that we should run a proper change model. So, why does the university desire to, do a pulse survey? I think we kind of start with why we're doing it. What is the purpose? So that's where I would start. And, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but I do perceive there to be a lot of value with starting with why or that purpose. And then I think to a little bit of what we touched on, you're going to get a really quick lift. So when employees see that you've asked 5 quick questions, so you held up your end of the bargain because this is fast, and then you've actioned and something for them is improved, whatever it is that you're diving deep on, you're going to actually get that buy-in very quickly to the pulse surveys versus 2 years is a long time. So I would say at least annually, maybe we stair step. So you go annually, then maybe every 6 months on engagement if you can't launch directly into Pulse. But there's so much value in the Pulse. I don't know how to convey this on actionable insights very quickly to drive peak performance or to make those pivots in your business. It's so critical. So hit me up directly if I need to help you storyboard for your executive team. I'd be happy to do that. There's so much value.
Yeah, and I'll add a little bit to that. So the first thing I'll add is when you do present your business case to your leadership team, I think, the with you could even focus on the last year and a half with everything that's gone on, the traditional channels for gathering, you had your engagement survey, but historically we've had all of these informal channels to gather feedback, i.e., meeting in the kitchen or one-on-ones in the office or, quick coffee breaks. And what we have found is when those sources of feedback have been, closed off due to hybrid working, due to like accessibility issues, it's really hurt companies. And so where, maybe every 2-year survey was possible because there were other ways of other informal channels, particularly now, it's critical with everything that's still lingering in how we're working and the future of work, to get more, a more frequent pulse on what's going on. And I would say one good exercise that you could do is plan out a roadmap for the year. So what if we move to this? What does the first year look like? That's one of the first things we do when we engage a new customer during implementation. Is we try to create a roadmap for employee listening for a year. And that way we know, exactly what activities are being planned. And that's not to say we know we're going to do a well-being survey in Q1, and then we're going to do this in Q2, and then we're going to do that. That's not so much to that level of detail, but rather, here's what our calendar looked like before. It was once every 2 years. Now we're going to shift to, this type of cadence. I think it helps reinforce that it's not going to be a haphazard approach where you're just, flinging out pulse surveys whenever you want, but there is going to be a deliberate approach that is going to, give you value, because right now you only have a formal way of capturing that every 2 years. And the other thing I would say is don't bite off more than you can chew. Once you get approval,
Yeah.
be slow and steady, because what we find is many times, even companies will come to us and they're like, we want unlimited pulse survey. And if you don't have a culture of surveying, you may want to start with, 2 surveys or 3 surveys in a year, or, a quarterly survey. So think about that as well, because, there may be questions, when you're trying to get buy-in. But
one thing that you hit on, though, that I think is helpful to reinforce with making the change from, we did annual engagement surveys. So then, kind of our roadmap was quarterly, right? So let's ease into it. And then I think we're probably pulsing. It depends, right? Like there's no right or wrong, but as a topic comes up, and I would say to your point, over the last year and a half, pulses have become more. And what we have found is that our employees really appreciate it because we have shared essentially what goes into that process and really making sure that it's meaningful. So again, building that trust with your employees on the pulse surveys, they do very much appreciate when you're asking. It's because they now know there's action that will come out of it. So if that helps also with the storyboarding, we have found not to have, any challenges getting that data from the employees when you can actually deliver on what you say that you're going to do. So getting into a rhythm, but yeah, if you're every 2 years, maybe, twice a year.
Ooh, I love the next question. This is
Ooh,
from
okay.
Jessica Alamia. What is your advice on sharing insights in a positive, hopeful manner?
Wow.
I feel like if you could have underlined the hopeful, you would have, when the results really don't look good.
Okay.
Great question. I'm going to let you take that one. I'm sure, I'm assuming you've been in a position where you've had to communicate or share results that weren't great. So what do you do? How do you approach that?
So and that's a fabulous question. I think that's where like the behind the scenes conversation comes into play. But oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This isn't great. I will tell you, just my experience has been there is so much value to be gained from your employee base when you own it, and say you can do it very positively. So this is, these are areas that we're doing very well in, and so here's how we're going to continue to, kind of focus on these core areas or factors that we do well. Here's where we have an area of opportunity, or two areas. The areas of opportunity are here, and what we're going to do is engage to have thoughtful conversations with all of you. So whether that's through your culture teams or however you choose to structure that, to really understand maybe what's driving that. But I think it does come with, you can be very hopeful. You can share the negative feedback with a positive spin. And I think that comes through owning it. We're sorry, we've missed the mark on that. And here's what we're going to do to course correct. And we're going to need your help. So, we may ask you these questions again because we want to make sure that our actions truly are meeting your expectations. So I think own it. You can do it beautifully. You can do it eloquently, but you have to kind of own the negative with the positive and show those actions very specifically, scorecard them. So we're big proponents of scorecards. I love green. Okay. I don't like yellows and reds. It just makes me sad. But I think that's how we've been able to kind of present to the team that this is what we're doing well. This is where we're missing the mark. And this is really where we're off track. So to get back on track, we need you to help us. And here are the actions that we're going to take, and hold us accountable to that. And if it's not working, then we'll course correct together. So that's one way that we've chosen to do it. Stephen, I'm sure you have
Yeah,
more insights.
well, yes, I do. I can't speak for, and one, this is one just personal one, as it relates to Workify. One of the things that we do is we have, we do walkthroughs of the survey results.
Mhm.
And so, this is very specific to the way we work with our clients, but you can use a third party to get involved in sharing the results in a way that is like a impartial, I guess.
Yeah,
But in the event that you don't have that with a provider, you don't get that level of service. I think that typically we have an insights format that we use, and it's like three. We always focus on like three positive aspects of the pulse survey, and then we focus on three aspects of areas for improvement, and we try to, it's like a balanced scorecard approach.
absolutely. Mhm.
And there are some cases where it's just like bleeding red, right? I think the reality, these are hard truths. So I try to take a hard truths approach to the conversation, and use it to have a conversation or dialogue. Clearly there are different managerial and executive styles that may make that approach difficult. But the reality is, like, in this current environment, we are in the Great Resignation. Like, this is actually a thing and it's happening. And so, if your executives aren't willing to hear that, like, I think that might be a good reminder of the situation we're in right now, to create focus and understanding of, like, okay, these are tough things to hear, but we need to take action. So, and Jessica, you can lean on either
Yeah.
of us if that didn't quite hit the mark, and we'd be happy. Rhiana and I would be happy to dig into that. A few more questions. So we're gonna. Do you have a hard stop, Rhiana, or can we get through the remaining
I would
questions?
love to get through all the
Three more.
questions. I'll make the time. Happy to.
Cool. Same here. Would it be possible to get a general idea of what of the results were of a survey, and an example of a result presented to deal with it? So I'm not, I think the question here is, what are, how do you take the results, like what does that report out look like? And that you're presenting to your leadership team, to the executive team. Kelvin, correct me in the chat if I got that wrong.
So I can tell you what I do, and if it's off the mark, we'll watch the chat. So depending on the platform that you're using, you can slice the data a number of different ways. I personally like a heat map view. So a little bit of what Stephen was just touching on, kind of, what has seen as favorable or unfavorable. Change the question mid-question. I'm going to roll with it anyways. So heat map view, you can also do, and I love this one, and this is how we present the data out to our employees, is top three, bottom three, or kind of most favorable, least favorable, whatever words you want to use, to show what we're really doing well, not doing well. But when I'm sharing the data more specifically with the exec team, we are in the tool together, and I'm hitting all of those drill downs. Let me show you every single level of metrics and data. Depending on what the topic is, sometimes maybe that isn't necessary, but I'm a big proponent in transparency. So you're going to see what I have eyes on, and we're going to solution together. I think now that conversation may change on how you want to roll that out to your organization. I think that's, company specific. But I really do like the approach, and have done a lot of value on kind of top three, bottom three, with then how do we close the gap on those bottom three? Hopefully that answers the question.
Love it. Love it. And Kelvin, I would be happy to I would be happy to share with you a sample of what a dummy Workify Insights report looks like, based on like demo data, just so you can get an idea if that in fact is the question you're asking. And sorry if we missed the mark. Moving on, we have two questions left, and we have a third that just hit the chat, and I can answer that quickly. We will definitely share a recording of the session, so no worries if you joined us late. Mary Burley asks, what platform, Zoom, Teams, etc., can be used for pulse surveys? And so I will answer, and then I'll let Rhiana answer. This is a webinar sponsored by Workify, and in full transparency, the reason why is because we are an employee feedback platform, and we offer pulse surveys. So, obviously one option is Workify, and we would be happy to talk to you about that. The difference between there's quick polling and there are pulse surveys. Mm-hmm. And quick polling, I have found like Zoom, Teams, Slack, those are all great tools if you want to do quick polling. And depending on the nature of your topic, that might be good enough. The survey platforms out there like Workify, Rhiana, you can share what you guys use. What platform are you guys using?
So we're using Qualtrics, but this has been kind of an evolution. So we've started with more boutique firms, and then as we've grown as an organization, we've now, shout out to our friends at Qualtrics. We love Workify, but there are a number of platforms. Again, I'm going to go back to, unless it's a quick poll that you want from your organization, what does help you tell that story, to go partner with, the experts in this space. It's going to make your life so much easier. It's going to make the results better, and you'll, candidly, just a better result for the company overall.
I agree. Yeah, the difference between a kind of rudimentary tool, even like a survey tool like SurveyMonkey, and the platforms that are dedicated like Workify and Qualtrics to employee feedback, it's a big difference in the type of reporting you get, the capabilities, et cetera, et cetera.
It's a total game changer. It's a no-brainer once, even just demo one of the systems compared to one of the free tools out there, and it'll speak for itself, trust me.
The last question we've actually already answered. It was, Stephen, can you please share the 6 indicators? I've shared that in the chat. If you want any more information, I would be happy to share, more about the model that we put together, and can also answer questions like what are information about other models, etc. So I think we're good there. I think that gets us to a closing point. I want to thank everyone for hanging on, staying on the line for as long as you did. I want to thank Rhiana for joining us and sharing all the amazing feedback. And we'll be doing our next educational series in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out if you're interested in joining our next session. thank you so much. And with that, we'll close the session for today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.